Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Brian, and this is Our Weird World. Hey, so I hope you all enjoyed that last episode about the UFOs. That was a fun one to record. Had some interesting experiences that I got to share there with you. Hopefully, some of you out there have had similar interesting experiences. If you have, please still continue to share them with me. I'd love to hear it. I actually recently watched a movie that was, I guess, somewhat related. It was a sort of alien invasion, um, invasion of the body snatchers kind of retelling. It's a new one on Hulu that actually just released on September 22nd. It is called No One. What was it called? No One Will Save You. Yeah, No One Will Save You. I have to say, I really enjoyed it. Not trying to give any movie critiques or anything, but it was really good. I really liked it. It was very well done. And to give a small spoiler, it won't spoil the story, but there's no dialogue. There's zero dialogue in the movie. There's nothing. Now there is alien dialogue between some aliens in the movie, but I don't speak their alien language, so I have no idea what they're saying. But you get the idea through what's going on and the way the music is playing and everything. But very interesting that there's zero dialogue from start to finish. It's like roughly an hour and a half, and it's just this alien invasion of the body snatchers kind of movie. But really fun. Has a lot of the typical horror movie jump scare tropes. A lot of the typical stuff, kind of you see it coming kind of stuff. But it's still had a good. Definitely startled me a good few times for sure. But really good, really entertaining. So if you have Hulu and you're looking to watch a fairly scary, fun, entertaining movie, especially this time of year as we go into fall, getting closer to Halloween, it's one I definitely recommend. If you don't like alien invasion, abduction kind of stories, then maybe pass on it. But otherwise, it's a really good movie. I really enjoyed it, so maybe you could enjoy it too. So check it out. Yeah, I recommend it. But so what are we talking about today in this episode? Well, based on the headline, we might get a little bit sciencey, talking about some of this stuff. But I mentioned it about a year. Was it a year ago? It's been a while now. Yeah, it was September of last year. The Alan Eugene Miller was supposed to be executed in the state of Alabama, and they wanted to use this new untested method of nitrogen hypoxia, and they didn't go through with it. They later went to execute him via lethal injection, and that didn't go as planned either. And I talked about it in that episode. If you want to check it out, I'll link it here too. The failed execution of Alan Eugene Miller. But so, anyways, it's kind of come back up in the news. This whole nitrogen hypoxia deal. There are currently 3 states here in the United States that will allow it. However, it's not been performed yet. There is no state that has actually executed somebody on death row, an inmate, using this method yet. It's still untested at this point. Here we are a year later when they were supposed to have their first inmate be executed using this method, and a year later it still hasn't been done. It still has not been performed. But the state of Alabama, once again, is making headlines because they want to execute another inmate on death row using this method of nitrogen hypoxia. So I'm going to talk about that briefly first, and then we'll get into a little bit about what nitrogen hypoxia is, how it works. We'll get a little sciencey, and then we'll come back to what's going on in Alabama. So the reason I wanted to talk about this was I saw this headline. Like I've said before on my podcast, I like to get online and check various news sources, see what's going on in the world, anything that kind of pertains and relates to this podcast, whether it's paranormal, weird histories, murder, stuff like this, talking about inmates, whatever, all the stuff that would relate to our weird world, right? And I was just scrolling through, looking at different news sources, looking at different articles. Oh, what should I talk about? What should I do my next episode? I'm still going to do some of the serial killer episodes. Those are definitely coming up, so don't worry. I have more of that in the works as well. Have some stuff coming up here soon for October, because as you know from my last Halloween episode, I love Halloween, so of course I got to do something for that. Plus I did the Friday the 13th one earlier this year. We have another Friday the 13th coming up here in October, so of course I got to do some stuff in that time frame. So I do have stuff like that coming. So yeah, anyways, I was looking through these different headlines, reading different articles, thinking, what should I talk about? What am I finding that might be interesting? So I read this headline. Says this is the headline, quote, Alabama inmate opposes being, quote, test subject for new nitrogen execution method. And so it reminded me of that story that I did, the episode I did last year of Alan Eugene Miller, because I remember mentioning that, researching that, about him supposed to be executed that method, and in the last minute they said, no, we're going to do lethal injection instead, and then the failed execution and all that. So it reminded me of that. I thought, oh, well, what's this? What's going on? Let me read this article. So I read the article, looked into it. Again, state of Alabama. They are one of 3 states in the U.S. that are allowed to do this new execution method. But again, nobody has actually done it yet. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. It's the same state as before, and it's another death row inmate that they want to do this. And just like Alan Eugene Miller, this inmate is basically saying, no, I don't want to have this done because it's never been done before. Okay. And one of the quotes that he says, him and his lawyers said that it's an experimental execution method that hasn't been tested. I can understand that. And they proclaimed it as being like human experimentation, basically. So we have this inmate that is supposed to be executed. The state wants to execute him through this new method, but him and his lawyer are saying, no, you can't do this. It's not humane because it's human experimentation. I guess to a certain level, it definitely is. Because it is a method of execution that has never been done on a human. Now, when we talk about the scientific side of stuff here in a little bit, there's been a lot of research into it and how it should work, how it's supposed to work, based on the science of how nitrogen works and how our bodies work with breathing and whatnot. So based on all that, it should work. But again, it has not been performed on an inmate, so they're claiming it's human experimentation, that it's unethical, and that they can't do it, even though technically their state laws say they can. But again, they haven't done it yet on anybody. So that's what they keep claiming. They're saying that it's unethical. You can't do this. Yes, I'm supposed to be killed. I'm on death row, but there's other methods. Kill me. There's other ways. Basically the same thing as what happened last year with Alan Eugene Miller. Kind of the same thing over again. And funny enough, in the same state. And the same Supreme Court is getting involved again too. But that's a little bit about what's going on. So what exactly is nitrogen? What is nitrogen hypoxia? How does it work? And how does it work in our bodies? So let's talk about that a little bit so we get an understanding of what's going on. Like I said, I'm going to get pretty sciencey here. I'll try not to get too crazy. This stuff I really like. I enjoy this sort of stuff, like on the science side, learning this kind of thing. Like I was never good at chemistry. Like when I took it in high school, I passed, but I never liked it then. But now that I'm 40 and like older and I love science and this sort of stuff, like chemistry, it's really astonishing. I really like this stuff. So I might nerd out a little bit, but I'll try to keep it pretty mellow. So yeah, anyway, so what is nitrogen? You've probably heard the term nitrogen. Some of you may know more about it. Some may know less. I have a pretty vague understanding of it. I've worked in places that use liquid nitrogen and have it around. I've worked at places that have nitrogen in gas form. It's very dangerous stuff from the training that I went through. I've never had to deal with it directly or had any like safety issues or incidences occur directly because of it, but I have been a part of like safety response teams at companies I've worked at. So, and having nitrogen in our buildings, we're trained on what to look out for and how to deal with it and how to respond. So things like that. But so if you're not familiar, nitrogen, it's a chemical element. You have the periodic tables. It's one of our natural elements. Its symbol is N, the letter N, like November. Its atomic number is 7. I'm not going to go into all that, like the symbols and the atomic number. I was kind of diving into it when I was doing this research. Again, for me, it's fun. I like it, but I'm not going to go into that. If you want to do it, go check out the periodic table, learn more about the atomic numbers and the symbols and all that, and where that comes from. Great. Have at it. Have a blast. I'm not going to dive into it, but that's what it is. That's N. Atomic number is 7. So you'll often see it just an N, or you'll see it like a 7 that's like subscripted lower. It'll be like 7N. That's a common way you'll see it too. So if you see that symbol N or the subscripted 7 before the N, so nitrogen, it's a non-metal and the lightest member of the group 15 of the periodic table. Again, if you want to look into that more, go for it. I'm not going to get into it too much. It is one of the common elements in the universe, found all over. It's estimated to be seventh in total abundance in the Milky Way and in our solar system, so a very common element. Standard temperature and pressure, colorless and odorless, diatomic gas. Again, I dived into all this stuff, like researching. I'm not going to go into what a diatomic gas is. If you want to look it up, have at it. But you go down all these rabbit holes of all this stuff. To me, like I said, it's fascinating. I enjoy it, but I don't want to get too much into it. I'm just trying to give you a rough idea of what the heck nitrogen is, and then we'll get back to the whole hypoxia and how all that works, how it all relates. So nitrogen makes up roughly 78% of our Earth's atmosphere. Now that sounds like a lot. Now, like you'd think, well, it's 78% of our atmosphere. Why aren't we all just dropping dead? Why are we existing? Why are we living? Well, I'm going to talk about that too here in a minute of how our bodies work and how we breathe and our bodies filter. Now, this makes it the most abundant uncombined element in the air here on Earth. Pretty interesting, right? So the remaining percent is a mixture of oxygen and other gases. Our atmosphere, like I said, is 78% nitrogen, roughly 21% oxygen, and about 1% argon, carbon dioxide, and other gases. So that's what our atmosphere is made up of. And again, I'll get into how it works for us. So nitrogen occurs in all organisms, primarily in amino acids and thus proteins, in the nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, and in the energy transfer molecule adenosine triphosphate. The human body contains about 3% nitrogen by mass. It is the fourth most abundant element in the human body after oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. So it's around in our natural environment. The nitrogen cycle describes the movement of the element from the air into the biosphere and organic compounds, then back into the atmosphere. So nitrogen, it is a constituent of every major pharmacological drug class, including antibiotics. So it's all over, it's everywhere. You find it all over the place. It's a very common element that is all around us all the time, basically. I don't want to get into this too much about it. There's so much. If you really want to get into this, you can get into the atomic properties of it, the history of it, the isotopes. It gets pretty deep. You can get into the chemistry of it, the compound. I was going to go into a little bit more, but I'm going to kind of just leave it at that. I just want to give you, there's what it is. It's here. It's everywhere. It exists. So how does it work with us as humans? Why would it be able to be used as an execution method? So how do our bodies work? Our lungs are like a filter for breathing in the air so we can breathe, right? Well, you're not breathing in just air. You're breathing in a lot of other stuff, other toxins and things like that. It needs to be filtered out. So to give you an idea, a typical human breathes roughly 12 to 20 times per minute. And this is a rate that is influenced primarily by the carbon dioxide concentration wherever you're at. So you can imagine if you're somewhere in like the mountains where you're nowhere near like a city, vehicles, the carbon dioxide concentration, that local area is going to be a lot less than if you're in a city, right? So your breathing is going to be, you're not going to have to breathe as often because you're not going to be filtering as much bad stuff, such as carbon dioxide. Because of this affects the pH in your blood as well. You're breathing less, breathing more, breathing less carbon dioxide versus breathing more carbon dioxide. The pH in your blood is going to fluctuate and change because of that. Now, as you breathe with each breath, you get roughly a volume of about 0.6 liters in exchange from an active lung volume of about 3 liters. Now, again, I talked about the normal composition of Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% argon, carbon dioxide, and various other gases. Now, after just 2 or 3 breaths, now this is just kind of on overall, again, typical human, after 2 or 3 breaths of nitrogen, the oxygen concentration in your lungs would be low enough for some oxygen already in the bloodstream to exchange back to the lungs and be eliminated by exhaling. And you're going to be losing that oxygen from your bloodstream through the exhalation. The way that it works, so that last sentence just give you an idea of how when you're breathing in nitrogen, how it basically expels the oxygen out. So basically nitrogen, like for example, like if you're in a room just filled with pure nitrogen gas, basically it kind of displaces the oxygen and you don't have that oxygen. So you can breathe in nitrogen because again, our atmosphere, 78% nitrogen approximately, you're breathing it in. But because you have so much oxygen, that 21% roughly, the way our bodies filter it, that's okay. We are able to deal with that percentage of nitrogen and it doesn't have an adverse effect. We're able to breathe normal. But when you replace that 21% oxygen and now you make it all nitrogen, you're displacing all that oxygen. You have no oxygen to help you and you're breathing in just nitrogen. And like I mentioned, after 2 or 3 breaths of nitrogen, the oxygen concentration becomes so low, it pushes the oxygen out of your bloodstream through exhaling. And now you're getting nitrogen, too much nitrogen. And that's what basically causes you to you start to lose consciousness basically. So you become unconscious because of this as you breathe it in, and that's what causes asphyxiation or asphyxia, like they're talking about here, this execution method. If you're in an environment like that and you're breathing in just nitrogen with no oxygen in it, the asphyxiation can occur within about 1 minute roughly. Now this is all based on just scientific study. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where there's all this studying about it, how it affects the human body, that states like Alabama are saying, yes, we can use it as a method of execution because it will basically put you to sleep, essentially. It's kind of the idea. You'll basically fall asleep forever, is basically what happens. You'll have loss of consciousness, which results from critical hypoxia, is what they call it. This is when the arterial oxygen saturation is less than 60%. At an oxygen concentration in the air of 4 to 6%, there is loss of consciousness in about 40 seconds, and death will follow in roughly a few minutes. So that was a quote from, let me see, where was it at? Oh, where was the study on that one? I have all these different quotes and stuff that I'm like looking at and different research. This came from forensic pathology on asphyxia from Charlie D. Miller at charliedmiller.com. Okay, I was just trying to find my source there. That was a quote, that last one, about oxygen concentration. So yeah, basically your oxygen in your body gets displaced from all this nitrogen flooding into your system, causes you to go unconscious. You go into critical hypoxia. Your arterial oxygen saturation is too low. You pass out. You later die because you're not getting the oxygen in your body, because your body needs oxygen to function. So you lose that oxygen in your body. Now you have too much nitrogen and you go unconscious and you die. That's basically what happens. And that's the thought process with this nitrogen hypoxia execution method, is that their idea is that it's a humane way to put somebody down. Like, oh, we're just putting you to sleep. You're gradually falling asleep as you breathe the stuff in. You're dead within a few minutes. No big deal. You go unconscious, then you're dead a few minutes later. That's the idea behind it based on this study. Not this one, but I'm sure this one and others, but this sort of information that has been done through the study. But again, because people aren't just lining up to volunteer themselves, be tested and have this tested on them and be put to sleep and killed, so they don't truly know. There's ideas based on scientific studies again that this is what will happen, this is what we believe will happen. But the argument, like this gentleman, I say gentleman, but he's a murderer on death row, this man, Kenneth Eugene Smith, if I didn't say it earlier, Kenneth Eugene Smith, another Eugene. Alan Eugene Miller was the other one last year, and now it's Kenneth Eugene Smith. So him and his lawyers, they basically asked the Alabama Supreme Court to reject this execution method, that they want to do something else, just like Alan Eugene Miller. Because again, like I said before, they're proclaiming that it is unethical human testing of an unknown execution method. Last year was supposed to be the first one. It didn't happen. This is supposed to now be the first one. Will it happen? We don't know. We're uncertain at this point. It's now in the court's hands right now. We're in this sort of limbo mode right now of, is it going to happen? Are they going to allow it? We still don't know. Like I said before, there are 3 states in the U.S. that do allow this on the books. But again, it has not occurred yet. So we're at this point where it's like, there's only one way to find out, is to execute somebody. I know it sounds very morbid, but let's face it, we have convicts, murderers, for whatever reason, are on death row waiting to be executed. Most normal execution methods now here in the US are through lethal injection. That's what they claim is the most humane method now. Is you get this cocktail put into you through an IV and you fall asleep that way forever. Is that more humane? I mean, obviously it's been done enough now that I guess it is. They've found that, it just basically puts you down slowly, I guess, calmly. I've never experienced it, so I can't say how it feels. Bad joke? I don't know. But so yeah, so they're trying to use this new method that has been allowed legally in these 3 states, but it hasn't been performed yet, and they're trying to stop it. So I talked about Alan Eugene Miller, who he was a triple homicide back in 1999. He was supposed to be executed it was actually September 22nd of last year. Didn't happen. They had the whole failed lethal injection. That's a whole mess too. Okay, so last year, September 19th, the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Alabama, I may have discussed this in that episode previously, but they issued a preliminary injunction barring the state from killing Miller by any means other than nitrogen hypoxia, essentially amounting to a stay of execution until the state was ready to administer the new method. Earlier in that month, September of last year, 3 academics filed a human rights complaint with the United Nations on Miller's behalf regarding Alabama's use of lethal injection, which has been criticized as inhumane for causing excessive suffering, so on and so forth. I think I mentioned some of this in that episode last year too. So here's another thing. So some people claim that this term nitrogen hypoxia is not considered a real medical term. I mean, hypoxia is a real term. Nitrogen is obviously a real thing, real term, but they're putting the two together, and like basically people are saying that it's not a real medical term, putting nitrogen and hypoxia together, and hypoxia through breathing in nitrogen. But again, it kind of goes back to the whole, it hasn't been tested, hasn't been done on anybody yet, so it's not real. This isn't a real thing. This came from an associate professor of anesthesiology, Joel Zivit, out of Emory University, who co-authored this human rights complaint about Alan Eugene Miller. And his quote, one of his quotes is, quote, "There is nitrogen gas, that's a real thing. There is hypoxia, that means low oxygen." Again, this is a quote coming from Zivit. The quote continues, "But nitrogen hypoxia is a made-up two-word expression meant to sound like you're on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise." Okay, whatever. He says this referring to the spaceship Star Trek of the spaceship Star Trek fame. Excuse me, can't speak. Instead, Zivit actually recommended calling the procedure nitrogen gas execution. I guess that does make sense in that term as far as just what to call it, because then it's out there right in front, right out in front of you. Nitrogen gas execution. You're being executed through nitrogen gas, the use of nitrogen gas through breathing in. So I can get that for the humanitarian side of what to call it, but I mean, honestly, nitrogen hypoxia, it has a nice ring to it, not gonna lie. It sounds official to me because it is two things that are legit. Again, like he said, nitrogen is a real thing. It's a gas, it's an element. Hypoxia is a real thing. I mean, even in his quote, he says, nitrogen is a real thing, it's gas. Hypoxia, it's a real thing, meaning low oxygen. Nitrogen, gas, hypoxia, low oxygen. It makes sense. Honestly, I think it works. I don't have an issue with it personally. But hey, that's just me. That's my opinion. And you know what they say about opinions. But yeah, so that's what it is. That's where it's at right now. It's still in this whole limbo thing of, is it humane? Is it right? Should we do this? Can we do this? Again, I'm beating that dead horse. It hasn't been performed yet, so they don't know the end results. And the thing that comes to my mind, like reading that thing from the the professor of anesthesiology, is it kind of makes me think of like going into surgery. I've had surgery myself. I've been put to sleep for a major surgery. They have to be very conscious of you as the individual, your physical size, both in your height, your weight. They have to consider whether you're a male or female. So the anesthesiologist, when they're doing all of that, they have to take that into consideration and calculate for your physical size, what you are, who you are. I remember before going into it, almost like getting a physical, like they're measuring me and weighing me and checking all this stuff. And And the doctor was like, this is for the anesthesiologist, so they can know how much they need to give you when we put you under. Because if they give you too much, bye bye, you're gone. If they give you too little, you're going to be awake or you're going to wake up during the procedure, and you don't want that. So they have to find that balance of, based on historical evidence, using anesthesiology to put people under for surgeries. All this past history, there's so much evidence and history of it that they know, okay, a person of this size, of this build, of this health, male or female, if we give them this much, it will put them at this point. And of course, they're monitoring you during surgery. They're monitoring your heartbeat, your respiration, all that sort of stuff to keep you in that sweet spot, basically. Yeah, it's kind of like the Goldilocks zone, right? Like of planets in the Goldilocks zone of just not too cold, not too hot, all that kind of stuff, right? They got to find that sweet spot, like I said, because they don't want to kill you, and they don't want you coming to or waking up or feeling the whole thing, anything like that. You may have heard horror stories of that. I've heard about that of people like waking up in the middle of surgery, and it's like, hey, doc, what's up? You done? You're supposed to be asleep. You're supposed to be under. So I've experienced that. Like I said, I've had surgery where I've been put under, and the anesthesiologist and the surgeon, like, they had an interview with me before, and like I said, it was almost like a physical. They're asking me questions, they're weighing me, they're measuring me. They're asking me about, like, they asked me about like how much I exercise, stuff like that, and they're looking at my weight and my everything, and it's so that anesthesiologist during the procedure can get it just right. So I think it's kind of that same thing too, that there's just not that history of this nitrogen hypoxia, where with, like I said, anesthesia, when you're being put under for surgery, it's been used for so long now. There's that really long history of, okay, we know that this is how it works. We know that if we give this person this much, we can keep them under for this long, and we can continue to give them the IV drip to keep them under for this long, however long the procedure is going to be. My procedure, for example, was like, I was under for like an hour and a half total. And it feels like a little 5-minute nap, like the greatest 5-minute nap I ever had. You wake up just feeling fantastic, a little nauseous afterwards, but I wasn't too terrible. But yeah, you wake up like, oh, I feel great. And then of course later everything sets in after the surgery, all the pain of them cutting you open, all that stuff, everything they do. But that's not the point. That's not what we're talking about. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. Like I mentioned, is that with this nitrogen hypoxia, it's an unknown. There's no history to it. Yes, we have the science that we can lean on and say, look, this is what nitrogen is. This is what it does. This is what science tells us that it does to the human body based on how our human body works, how we breathe, how we filter. This is what it should do. If we give you so much, should make you go under and take that long forever dirt nap. So that's the idea. But like I said, it's just, I think that's the big thing I think is what's holding everybody back, is that unknown. It hasn't been done. It hasn't been performed. Yes, it's mathematically, scientifically, all that. It says this is how it should work. But if there's that question of the unknown of will it work as advertised? I think that's the big scare behind it. And I get it. Yes, this person's a convict, and they're on death row to be executed. They obviously had their chance. They've been put there. They're in line to get executed. It sucks. They are human. I'm not going to go into his history. I did when I was doing this research. I looked into what he did. It's heinous, of course. But at the same time, I get it. It's like he knows he's going to get executed. He knows he's going to be killed, but he doesn't want to be that lab rat. And that's what him and his lawyer are getting at. So we don't want to be the first one for this experiment. I use the term experiment kind of loosely. For me, even just a simple little research on this, it seems like the science is pretty sound on how it would work. But once again, there is that unknown. And that's what they're leaning on, him and his lawyer, of that unknown. Of, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. It's never been done. You don't know what's going to happen. Why should I have to face this unknown? I know I'm going to get executed, but why should I be the one to have this method used first when we don't truly know what will happen? Me personally, again, opinion here, but I'm just going to put it out there. Based on what I've looked at again with my research, I would assume it'll work just fine based on how nitrogen works, based on the jobs I've had before where we've had nitrogen in our facility and the things that I've been trained on, if you huff in nitrogen long enough in the right amount, you're going to die. Is it going to be painful? Is it going to be unpainful? Is it going to be calming? I don't know. And that, again, that's the thing that it's like, even some of this research I found, they said that there's like, there's no firsthand accounts because I haven't found any, even with my research. But they claim that you can experience things such as dizziness, nausea, upset stomach, headaches, things like that. And I guess that's probably coming from people that might have been exposed to higher than normal amounts, but obviously not to the point of dying. So is that stuff they're concerned about? Like, you're about to get executed. Like, are you worried about having a headache and having some nausea and dizziness? Like, is that really the issue? Is that a part of it? I don't really see that being a problem. Like, you're about to get executed. It reminds me of the old, I think it was Robin Williams had a joke on his live stand up about lethal injection, about like that last, like, you're getting a needle in you and they give you the alcohol swab in your skin, right? It's like, oh, okay, you're about to execute me. Yeah, let's worry about giving me an infection right before you're about to kill me. Kind of like, what's the point? Like, I get it's practice, right? It's common practice that you, out of habit. But he had this joke, I don't remember it verbatim, but that was the idea of like, I'm about to get killed by lethal injection. You're giving me an alcohol swab to clean my arm before you stick needle in my vein. What's the point? So for me personally, it's like, well, if you're going to kill them by nitrogen hypoxia, just do it. Get it over with. If they get a headache or get nauseous or get dizzy, well, are any of us really going to know? Because they're going to die. We're probably not going to know that, oh, I've got a headache. Can you give me some ibuprofen before you kill me off here? I know, it might sound kind of morbid and bad of me to say that, but let's face it, it's probably going to be part of it, right? What do people face when they get lethal injection? Do they go through symptoms like that before they go under? Again, we don't know. We can't ask them because they're dead. I would assume that's a part of it, the whole big argument of it. But again, it's just that whole ethical thing. So I feel like I rambled on enough and probably rambled a little bit more than I wanted to. But again, I saw this headline and it reminded me of that, the execution from last year that was failed with Alan Eugene Miller, and just brought it to my mind again. And I just thought it'd be neat to talk about it a little bit more. And this person, if you want to look into it more, you can certainly check it out. Alabama Supreme Court, they're the ones that are dealing with this. It was actually filed last Friday, which was September 22nd. So actually a year to date, actually, from Alan Eugene Miller's execution last year, September 22nd. Kind of funny. Interesting. Same middle name, same state, basically the same thing. They're trying to kill him by the same method, and exactly a year apart. But anyways, this guy's name is Kenneth Eugene Smith. They asked Alabama Supreme Court to reject this. So yeah, if you want to know more about it, you can check it out. I'm sure you could look up nitrogen hypoxia. As soon as I typed in those words, the different search engines I like to look for stuff, that's all that kept coming up was stories related to this execution here. This guy, again, Kenneth Eugene Smith, and the Alabama Supreme Court. It all kept popping up, stuff like that. So there's certainly plenty out there if you want to look into it more. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I read a lot of stuff about him and about what he did and what's going on and this whole deal with the Supreme Court right now and their filing that they did with his lawyer and everything. There's a lot to it. So anyways, just wanted to talk about that. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much. Again, I do have some more episodes coming. I've got my infamous serial killers episode still more to come. Again, it's going to be October soon. We can do some more October episodes. Friday the 13th is coming up. Hopefully I can do some more on that. I did mention that earlier this year that I'd try to do some more on that. Halloween. I love Halloween. I love this time of year. I love the fall. I love when the weather starts to get a little cooler. It's just really nice out. The pumpkin spice, all that stuff, I don't really care about. Whatever. Go enjoy your pumpkin spice if you do. But yeah, this time of year I love this season, fall. I love when it starts to cool down a little bit, but not crazy cold. Especially here where I live in New Mexico, we have beautiful weather this time of year. It's fantastic. If you enjoy beer, you got Oktoberfest beers all over the place now, which are my absolute favorite. I love Oktoberfest beers. If you ever want to sit down and have a beer with me, Oktoberfest this time of year, any of them. I love Oktoberfest beer. So But yeah, so that's coming up, some Halloween episodes. Maybe I'll do some more spooky stuff going into the later into the year as well too. So just kind of along those lines of Halloween and things like that. So it's a good time of the year for that, right? Going into fall, do some more of the spooky stuff. You tend to see more movies come out this time of year, like the horror movies coming out. There's the new Exorcist one coming out. That looks pretty scary. The original one's great. So yes. Anyways, find me on Instagram, Our Weird World, Facebook, Our Weird World. If you want to reach out, say hi, send me something, suggestion, comment, complaint, whatever. You can find me the best way through email is ourweirdworldpodcast@gmail.com. I also have the podcast now on YouTube. I've had it on there for a while now. So you can find it on there as well if you want to listen to episodes. But yeah, it should be pretty much available wherever you find your podcast. So yeah, thanks a lot. Enjoy your fall. And until next time, stay safe and we'll catch you later.